We begin to hear the sound where President Cyril Ramaphosa is attending the private funeral service of the late Rev Jesse Jackson and will deliver a tribute to the private funeral of the civil rights leader. Rev Jesse Jackson leaves behind a legacy that inspired movements around the world and during the darkest days of apartheid, when oppression was law and isolation was policy, and he stood firmly with the people of this country. And joining us now for more on this, we are now joined by SABC News specialist correspondent Sophie Mokoena. She's with us in studio this evening, as well as struggle veteran Reverend Frank Chikane, and he joins us now via our video link. And we're going to start off here. Of course, Sophie, I'm going to start with you. We do know that President Cyril Ramaphosa is set to deliver a tribute this evening at the main official service. And what is the significance of President Cyril Ramaphosa not only attending this funeral, but also delivering this tribute?
Well, I think it's quite important for South Africa. As you know, that Reverend Jesse Jackson was a friend to South Africa before 1994, and also after 1994. He supported the liberation movement in South Africa, particularly at a crucial time when South Africa needed that international solidarity. He was at the forefront. And secondly, he continued to have this relationship with the African National Congress and the leaders of the Congress movement. Perhaps let's take a listen at this clip when he was in South Africa in 2012, where ANC was celebrating its centenary. Let's take a listen at what Reverend Chikane, Reverend Jesse Jackson had to say at that moment in South Africa in 2012.
The parallels strike me. In 1911, a group of intellectuals and ministers got together and formed the National NAACP. Dr. Dubé was studying in the U.S. He met with many of those leaders. He came south, met with Booker Washington. He went to Tuskegee Institute, and part helped inspire Fort Hare, both fighting rigid legal segregation. USA, Union of South Africa, USA, United States of America had parallel trading relationships, and they became allies across the century. But we kept fighting back, interrelating. We also were fighting our basic dignity. And so out of that emerges in part, you see Dr. Lutuli getting the Nobel Peace Prize, Dr. King getting the Nobel Peace Prize. You see the impact of 1965, a black church, a Methodist church, Brown's Chapel AME Church. That struggle came a bloody Sunday, and it was a kind of like a Sharpsville type massacre. That struggle, the right to vote. The right to vote, then those blacks voted for sanctions against South Africa, which helped to free South Africa. And so here we are 100 years later with Lutuli, Dr. King, Nelson Mandela, Barack Obama, and Zuma. So 100 years, we'll both have heads of state. We've gone from the lower ranks of degradation. Now, I'm excited about the fact this is after our struggle. We got in 2008 an African-American president who has roots in Kenya. And what excites me today is to think that our struggle really has just begun. We're free, but not equal. And I want people to realize that the apartheid struggle is not over. The skin layer of it is over, the humiliation is over, the degradation is over. But the apartheid runs deep: agricultural apartheid, banking apartheid, land ownership apartheid, education apartheid. Because what happened was, in South Africa, the minority controlled the majority of resources and use those resources to enhance the minority at the expense of the majority. So you have a new government now that wants to have a one big tent. What's significant, it seems to me, is that this is the best South Africa's ever been. There's never been a multiracial, multicultural society for all South Africans. The new South Africa for all people is just 18 years old. So I want people to have the zeal of revolutionary change, but know that in 18 years, this is one of the great epic struggles of the whole world. Collective strength now to fight for trade relations, because we still got to deal with the levels of separation of advantages. The right to vote in America gave us a head of state. It did not change the infrastructure of segregation within the U.S. Here you have an African National Congress, but the infrastructure of apartheid, the ownership is very much intact. So one century won the freedom battle. This general must fight the equality battle.
All right, Sophie, thank you so much for that clip. Let's now go to Reverend Frank Chikane. Mr. Chikane, thank you so much for your time this evening here in SABC News. And as we pick up from that clip, and that stems from a visit that the late Reverend Jesse Jackson, when he was in the country, maybe let's start off there. And maybe if you can take us down, memory lane in terms of what you remember during the numerous occasions when the late Reverend Jesse Jackson came to South Africa.
Well, let me say two things. The first one is that our struggle for liberation here in South Africa was similar to the struggle of the African Americans in the United States. They were dealing with a racist, oppressive system. We dealt with a more systematized racist apartheid system. And because of that, we were able to link up the two struggles, like, the piece that you just showed now. And for that reason, from the beginning, from our leader Dube and others who followed, we always worked together with African Americans, especially at the Pan-African level, and in terms of theology, in terms of Black theology, in terms of interpretation of what was happening. And Jesse Jackson was part of the leadership in that process. And I had an opportunity of hosting him when he was in South Africa as General Secretary of the Council of Churches. He was there when Walter Sisulu, our comrade Walter Sisulu, was released from jail. He was also there when Mandela was released from jail. In fact, he went with us to Victor Verster, and he came back with us, and he nearly got crushed when we entered Cape Town because people thought he was Mandela. I mean, he was driving on an armored vehicle, and that's why they actually thought that is Mandela. But they were not crushing him. They were trying to get to Mandela.
All right,
And
Reverend, I'm so sorry to interrupt you. I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but it seems as if the funeral service is now underway. And unfortunately, we're going to have to take our viewers there. All right, that is Reverend Frank Chikane there, just giving us a synopsis and reflecting on the life of times of Reverend Jesse Jackson.